Hello friends. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. We never really talked much, Uncle Raymond and I. At family gatherings, he was the quiet one, the kind of man who didn't join the laughter or small talk, who just sat at the end of the table, half smiling, half somewhere else. That weekend, though, something changed. We were all at Aunt Clara's house for her birthday dinner. The roast smelled incredible, and for once, Uncle Ray looked proud of what he'd made. I told him, "This is amazing. Where'd you learn to cook like this?" Aunt Clara laughed, sipping her wine. "You'll never believe it. He learned back when he worked at the asylum," I blinked. "Wait, an asylum? Like a mental hospital?" Raymond nodded slowly, still chewing his food. "Yeah, Brookvale State Hospital, outside Dayton, 1960s. I laughed a little, thinking she was exaggerating. "You mean, you cooked for the patients?" He wiped his hands on a napkin. "With them. Sometimes beside them. It was part of their therapy." He looked at me then, not smiling, not joking, just remembering. That was the moment I realized this wasn't one of those funny family stories. "Your mom never told you, huh?" he said softly. "She probably didn't know." "Most people in the family don't," I leaned forward. "So what happened?" He paused, swirling his bourbon in the glass, staring through it like a man watching an old film only he could see. Then he said, "You sure you want to know, kid?" "Because it's one of those stories that sticks to your ribs. Doesn't wash off easy." I nodded, and so he began. "It was October 23rd, 1967, he said. "I remember, because your aunt had just given birth to your cousin Michael the week before. I was 24, working double shifts to make ends meet. Brookvale was a big, gray building out on County Road 12. Looked more like a factory than a hospital. It had 3 wards, A, B, and C. A was for the quiet ones, B for the unpredictable, C for the ones no one else wanted to see." He chuckled darkly. "Guess which one my kitchen was near?" Every morning, he explained, he'd arrive before sunrise. The halls were always silent then. No footsteps, no voices, just the hum of old fluorescent lights and the distant click of metal doors locking for the day. He'd unlock the kitchen storage and take out the knives. Each one had a numbered tag and was logged by hand. They weren't allowed to keep them out once patients came in, so all cutting and prep had to be finished before breakfast. "That morning was like any other," he said. "I was humming some Sinatra tune while slicing potatoes. The smell of bleach was so strong it made your eyes water, but I didn't mind it. That smell meant safety." He looked at me and smiled faintly. "Funny thing about routines. They make you feel safe even when you shouldn't." He continued. "Around 6:30, I looked at my knife set and noticed something off. One of the paring knives was gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it. Maybe I'd used it and set it down somewhere. Happens. But I looked around. Sink, floor, counter. Nothing." His voice dropped lower. "You know that cold feeling you get when your brain suddenly realizes something's wrong? That little click in your stomach? That's what hit me." He said he recounted every knife 3 times. 9 were there. 1 wasn't. He locked the kitchen door, pocketed the keys, and went straight to the supervisor's office. Within minutes, the asylum was in lockdown. They searched every hallway, every room, every patient. The guards went cell by cell, and every resident was accounted for. He paused, running his thumb along the rim of his glass. So where was the knife? No one could answer. Dr. Bowman, the director, told him not to worry, that it was probably just a logging error. But Raymond had been the one logging them that morning. He knew what he'd taken out. I blamed myself, he said quietly. Offered to pay for the damn thing, even though it wasn't about money. But deep down, I knew what it meant. Something in that building wasn't right anymore. He asked for an orderly to stay with him for the rest of the shift. They sent a young guy named Carl Miller, ex-military, big smile, didn't believe in superstition. He joked about it, Raymond said. Maybe one of the ghosts got hungry, he said. But I wasn't laughing. They spent the next hour prepping vegetables in silence. The clock ticked slow, and every sound in the hallway made them both flinch. Then the intercom buzzed. Attention all staff. Secure your area. Remain inside until further notice. That tone, he said, wasn't the usual one. This one was longer, sharper, urgent. Miller locked the kitchen door again. They looked at each other. No one said it out loud, but they both knew. Something had gone terribly wrong. An hour passed, then another. No updates, no footsteps, just silence. Around noon, the kitchen phone rang. Raymond motioned for Miller not to answer. The young man frowned and picked it up anyway. Brookvale Kitchen, he said casually. There was a pause. Then a voice came through. Low, hoarse, distorted. Brookvale's full of freaks and geeks. Which one are you? Miller froze. Raymond said the sound was wrong. Too deliberate. Too calm. Who is this? Miller said. The voice laughed. You'll find out soon enough. Then the line went dead. They stared at each other. Miller tried calling the front desk, but no one answered. He tried the guard station. Nothing. That was when Raymond decided to call the sheriff's department directly. This was before 9/11 existed, so he had to use an outside line. I told them we were on lockdown. Phones were being used by someone else, and we thought something bad had happened. They said they'd send a deputy. Then they waited, and waited. Raymond said, time lost all meaning in that kitchen. He could hear faint noises from the hallway, dragging sounds, soft thuds, maybe footsteps. Once he swore he heard whispering. Miller said it was probably the pipes, but then came the knocking. Not on the door, but along the wall behind the pantry shelves. Slow, heavy, measured. Thud. 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 Raymond whispered. There's no hallway behind that wall. Miller grabbed a frying pan. It was the only thing he could use as a weapon. The knocking stopped. And then, silence again. I've never been that scared in my life, Raymond said. Not because of what I heard, but because of what I didn't hear. Because silence in that place meant something was thinking. They stayed still for another hour until the lights flickered. Then, finally, a voice over the intercom. It wasn't the usual operator. It sounded like someone breathing too close to the microphone. All clear, it said. Come out now. Raymond didn't move. Miller almost did. But something about that voice wasn't right. It sounded too strained, like someone forcing the words through a grin. We're staying put, Raymond said. 4 hours later, the real police arrived. They knocked on the kitchen door and shouted their names. Raymond peeked through the window slit and saw 2 uniformed officers, and behind them, Dr. Bowman, his white coat soaked in blood. He unlocked the door slowly. The smell hit him first. Copper and bleach, thick in the air. The hallway looked like a war zone. Trays and papers scattered. A stretcher overturned. Red footprints leading toward Ward C. Dr. Bowman looked at him with hollow eyes. One of the patients, Henry Cottrell, somehow got hold of a knife. He killed an orderly, took his keys, and released half the patients in Ward C. They attacked anyone they saw, each other, even the guards. Raymond felt the world tilt. How did he get the knife? The doctor shook his head. We don't know. One of the deputies looked at Raymond. If you hadn't called us when you did, we might have lost everyone in this wing. The rampage ended in the chapel. They found Henry Cottrell kneeling near the altar, muttering prayers in a voice that didn't sound like his. His hands were clean, his clothes soaked in blood. When they tried to take him, he just smiled and said, "It's quiet now." Then he bit his own tongue until he passed out. They moved the surviving patients to other hospitals. Brookvale shut down Ward C permanently. The report called it a containment failure due to staff negligence. But Raymond said everyone there knew that wasn't true. Because after that day, strange things started happening in the kitchen. The lights would flicker exactly 3 times at midnight. Drawers would open by themselves. And once, when Raymond came in early, every single knife was sitting perfectly upright in the cutting board, handles up, as if someone had arranged them overnight. He quit 2 months later. When he finished telling me this, the room was completely silent. Even Aunt Clara, who usually teased him, said nothing. Finally, she smiled nervously. "Oh, Raymond, don't scare the boy." He smiled faintly but didn't laugh. "I'm not trying to scare him. Just remind him that safety is an illusion, especially in places built to keep danger inside." He pushed his chair back and went outside for a smoke. I sat there, heart thumping, staring at the half-empty plate in front of me. And that's when I noticed it. On the edge of the kitchen counter, a paring knife, old, rust-spotted, its wooden handle worn smooth by time. Etched faintly along the blade were the words, "Property of Brookvale State Hospital." Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. I went to the kitchen for a glass of water. The lights were off, but the moon through the window gave enough to see. The knife was still there. I stepped closer. The air was cold. The faucet dripped once, twice. I picked the knife up, half expecting it to feel heavy, cursed. But it didn't. It just felt old. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else's fingerprints were on it. I looked at the blade, dull, harmless. Yet somehow, when I caught my reflection in it, I swear I saw another face behind mine. Just for a second. I put the knife back exactly where I found it. The next morning, it was gone. Aunt Clara thought maybe I'd moved it while cleaning. Uncle Raymond didn't say a word. He just smiled that quiet smile of his, the kind you only wear when you know something no one else does. My name is Eric, and Axel had been my best friend since the day we could walk. We grew up on the same street in a small Northern California town. By the time we were 5, we were inseparable. He was sarcastic, sometimes obnoxious, but full of life. And he had this way of making everyone around him laugh. People always assumed Axel was one of those kids who had some quirk from birth. But no, he was normal, happy, ordinary, the kind of kid who made life feel easier. And maybe that's why losing him hit me so hard. 2 years ago, after graduation, Axel and his parents were on their way to Los Angeles. They were driving to celebrate Axel's acceptance into college, planning to spend the weekend at his grandparents' house, a 6-hour drive. They wanted to leave early in the morning to avoid traffic. They never made it. A drunk driver, barreling down the highway, slammed into their car. A full tractor-trailer T-boned their Honda Civic. Axel's parents were killed instantly. Axel survived, but not completely. Medically, his injuries were minor. His brain was intact, his spinal cord undamaged. Nothing should have prevented him from waking up. But he didn't. I visited him every day. I sat by his hospital bed, watching the monitors tick in a rhythmic hum, listening to the ventilator hiss. I talked to him, recounted old stories, begged him to wake up, and I waited. Weeks turned into months. The doctors were baffled. There was no medical explanation, no brain trauma, no chemical imbalance, nothing. Yet Axel remained trapped in silence. I didn't handle it well. Axel was more than a friend. He was a brother. He had been a constant presence in my life, and suddenly he was gone. 5 months after the accident, I was sitting in my dorm room staring at my old Chromebook. I rarely touched it. The device felt like a relic. But on that night, a strange email caught my eye. No subject, no sender I recognized. Just a line of text. Do you want to save your best friend? I froze. My hand hovered over the mouse. I had only shared Axel's situation with a few people, none of whom would prank me like this. My first instinct was to delete it, but something compelled me to click the link. It led to a chat room, blank, sterile, no logos, nothing. Just a cursor blinking. Then the text appeared. I can help you. I laughed nervously. Yeah, right. Very funny, I need your help. I can bring him back. My heart skipped. Bring him back? How? Who is this? Axel. His soul. I can restore it, but I need your consent. I hesitated. Souls? Restoration? I wasn't religious. I had never believed in ghosts or spirits. But the chat knew Axel's name. And it knew me. This isn't a prank, right? I typed. Number. I can bring him back. I just need your approval. I stared at the words, my fingers frozen over the keyboard. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to shut down the computer and forget the whole thing. But the thought of Axel, of him waking up, alive, laughing, teasing me again, clouded my judgment. I typed the word that would change everything. Okay. The cursor blinked. Then a new line. Your contract has been approved. Almost immediately, my phone rang. The hospital. Axel had woken up, screaming, clawing at his throat, inconsolable. By the time I arrived, he was awake, but he wasn't Axel anymore. When I looked into his eyes, there was a flicker of recognition. And then it was gone. His body moved, but it wasn't natural. His expressions were jerky, unpredictable. Sometimes it was as if multiple faces flashed across his features. He screamed constantly, guttural sounds that made the walls of the hospital shake. Even restrained, gagged, strapped to a padded bed, the noises didn't stop. The doctors were baffled. He was awake, fully conscious, but not himself. Medically, there was nothing wrong. Mentally, everything had changed. I tried speaking to him, tried to hold his hand, tried to reach the friend I had known for 15 years. But he didn't recognize me, didn't respond, screamed in terror when I came near. Eventually, the hospital had to transfer him to an asylum. Ravenwood Asylum, in a remote area of Northern California, cold and surrounded by forests. They couldn't manage him. He was awake, but trapped inside a mind that was no longer his own. I visited Ravenwood once. Walking up the cracked stone pathway to the asylum, I felt the air thicken. The building itself was a gothic nightmare. Ivy crawling up the walls, broken windows, heavy wooden doors reinforced with steel. Fog clung to the ground like a living thing. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant, decay, and something I couldn't name. Hallways stretched endlessly, lined with small barred rooms. The lights flickered intermittently. Echoes of distant screams bounced off the walls, ghostly and inhuman. Axel was in a padded room. His screams pierced my ears. His eyes met mine, and I saw it again. The multiple faces, the fragmented consciousness. I tried to speak. He screamed louder. I had nightmares for months after that visit. His voice haunted me. Sometimes, I could hear it over my own breathing at night. Weeks later, I reopened the chat on my laptop. The messages were still there. See? I brought all of them, just like I promised. All of them. I didn't understand. What had I brought back? Do you understand now, Eric? I didn't reply. I couldn't. Axel's screams were in my head. His eyes, wild and unrecognizable, burned into my memory. I often think about that day, about my choice, about clicking okay. Desperation had clouded my judgment. I wanted to save my best friend. And I did. But what came back wasn't him. Sometimes I wonder if he's even aware that he's alive, or if the being inside him is something else entirely. I go to college, try to live a normal life. I make friends. I laugh sometimes. But at night, I hear the screaming. I see the eyes. I feel the hands, the fragmented consciousness, the soul I thought I saved. And now, 2 years later, I've received a call from Ravenwood Asylum. Axel wants to talk to me. I don't know if I'm ready. Some things should never be tampered with. Some friends are best left in peace. And some choices are worse than death. I wanted to save my best friend, but in the end, I'm not sure if I saved him at all. I'm 22, living in a small, almost forgotten town in upstate New York. My name is Alex. I won't use my last name. Some things are better left private. My father, Dr. Martin, was a brilliant man, a doctor respected by everyone in town. He also died saving my life, though at the time, I didn't fully understand how. A little over a year ago, I was desperate, broke. I didn't have a penny to my name. My father was rich, but he had this strict belief. Just because I was his son didn't mean I should inherit his wealth. He gave me a roof over my head, food, the necessities, but that was it. No luxuries, no car, no tickets to concerts, nothing. The only exception, he found me a job. One morning, over a stale cup of coffee, he slid a business card across the table. "Alex, I've arranged something for you," he said. "Another job?" I groaned, rubbing my eyes. "I can barely survive this month as it is. Trust me." "This isn't just any job," I picked up the card. "Briarwood Asylum." "You're joking." "Nope," he said. "It's a janitorial position, but the pay is $25 an hour." I froze. $25 an hour? That was insane. For cleaning bathrooms and feeding patients? I was desperate enough to ignore that this place was an asylum in my small town. "What exactly would I be doing?" I asked. "Mostly janitorial stuff," he said casually. "Cleaning, serving meals, making sure the patients don't get too rowdy. That's it. Feeding patients? You're serious?" "You just pass trays through a slot. No spoon feeding," he reassured me. The money was too tempting. I said yes. That was the beginning of the worst experience of my life. Briarwood Asylum sat at the edge of town, framed by thick pine forests. Even in daylight, it seemed to swallow the sun, casting the building in a permanent shadow. Its paint was peeling, white with streaks of yellow, giving the impression of decay. The doors groaned as I pushed them open. Inside smelled of antiseptic, mold, and something I couldn't identify. A metallic undertone. My stomach twisted. A woman greeted me at a small reception desk. "Hi, you must be Alex," she said cheerfully. Yeah," I replied nervously. "I'm here to see Mr. Carter." "Bob Carter," she corrected. "Follow me." Her heels clicked against the tile floors, echoing eerily through the empty corridors. Her brown hair bounced with each step, and I immediately noted how out of place her stylish attire was in a facility like this. We reached Bob's office. A tall, thin man with a tired, almost hollow expression looked up. "Alex, right? Your dad called," he said. "I'll show you around." Bob led me down narrow hallways, pointing out 10 cells. 9 patients were nonviolent. The 10th, he was a murderer, clinically insane, and never allowed in prisons. Never talk to him, Bob warned. He's manipulative and violent. I met the patients one by one. Jackson, an old man with hollow eyes, shuffled past me like a zombie. Scar, a middle-aged man, rambled about tigers, lions, and mountain lions, almost delirious in his storytelling. Anne and Kate, two twitchy older women, flinched at nothing, running from imaginary threats. Renee, a young woman, had a tight muzzle over her face. Her screams were muffled, but her eyes screamed terror. Finally, cell 10. A shadow moved behind the sealed door. I felt a chill run down my spine. Tammy, Bob's assistant, tried to manage the chaos. "Let's play house," she announced. The patients erupted in excitement. Scar rolled on the floor like a dog. Jackson demanded to be a baby. Anne and Kate ran around, squealing. Then Kate declared herself my wife, wrapping me in an embrace. I froze. Tammy just smiled. "She's playing," she said. I wanted to scream. This wasn't play. This was chaos incarnate. Then came the blood-curdling screams from cell 10. I ran. My stomach dropped. Blood had pooled at the feeding slot. Two bloodshot eyes stared at me through the darkness. I found Tammy casually sitting, while Jackson latched onto her in a grotesque, disturbing act. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. "I'm going to tell Bob," I yelled. Tammy, eyes wide with panic, screamed at me to stop. The panic was contagious. I ran to Bob's office, only to find the man pointing a gun at his own mouth. The framed medical license behind him showed another face entirely. My fear turned to sheer terror. The man in the office wasn't Bob. I grabbed the keys from Tammy and sprinted to cell 10. Inside, the man, the real Bob, was restrained. Blood smeared the floor. Tammy emerged with a knife, moving like a predator. I stumbled into the cell and locked the door behind me. Bob whispered through clenched teeth. Renee, the young woman, had been his receptionist. Everything had spiraled into chaos. I spent the next 18 hours in that cell. Darkness pressed in from every corner. The muffled screams of the other patients echoed through the halls. Rats scurried across the floors, their tiny claws scratching against the concrete. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. My thoughts raced in terror. I kept thinking of my father. Dr. Martin had always been my protector, but even he hadn't prepared me for this. When the police finally arrived, Bob and Tammy were dead. Doors to cell 9 and 10 were cut open with blowtorches. Renee slowly returned to normal, but I never did. The images of the patients, their insane games, the blood, the screaming, they haunt me. A year later, I saw her again. Tammy, standing outside my window, staring with cold, lifeless eyes. Police watch over my apartment now, but the fear hasn't left me. Every shadow, every creak, every sound at night drags me back to those halls. Some nightmares never end. Some horrors follow you forever. I've started sleeping with lights on and a baseball bat at my side. Occasionally, I hear faint footsteps outside my door. I tell myself it's paranoia, but deep down, I know it isn't. Briarwood Asylum may be closed, but its whispers remain. They follow me. They are always waiting, and I am always afraid. I want to start by thanking everyone for the kind words after I posted my uncle's first story. He honestly didn't think anyone would care about the memories he's carried for half a century. But when I showed him the comments, something changed in his eyes. A mix of pride and fear. He said, "Maybe it's time people finally hear what really happened inside places like Ravenwood." He warned me, though. Some memories are better left buried. But as he leaned back in his old recliner, Staring through that flickering television light, he whispered, "You wanted another story, didn't you?" And that's when he told me about the one patient everyone at Ravenwood remembered, the mumbler. My uncle, Richard Holloway, was 28 then. He wasn't a doctor or a guard, just a kitchen hand who helped prepare meals for the staff and patients. Back then, Ravenwood sat on the edge of a small New York town, the kind of building that looked haunted even before the years turned it gray. The asylum had that smell, disinfectant over mildew, with a faint hint of copper in the air. He used to say that if you worked there long enough, you could tell which wing you were in just by the way the air tasted. South wing smelled like bleach and rust. East wing smelled like damp wood and old medicine. But the west wing, that's where the violent ones stayed. And that's where he was. The man everyone called the mumbler. Back then, Richard said political correctness didn't exist. Everyone had nicknames. There was One-Eye Charlie, the Laugher, and the Bird. But the mumbler was different. He wasn't violent. He wasn't loud. He just mumbled. He'd shuffle down the hallway with his head bowed low, wringing his hands against each other like he was trying to scrub off invisible filth. The sound of his mumbling would echo through the corridor. Low, wet syllables, never loud enough to understand, but enough to raise the hair on your arms. Richard said you could be working in the kitchen, cutting vegetables, and you'd hear him outside the door, whispering to himself like he was having a conversation with the walls. And the weirdest thing, he never looked at anyone. Ever. Ravenwood was chaos disguised as order. Every morning, the guards brought groups of low-risk patients to help in the kitchen, mostly as part of therapy. Cooking therapy, they called it. It was supposed to help them focus, stay calm, feel human again. But Richard said it always felt like being in a room full of ticking bombs. One bad word, one wrong move, and someone would explode. He remembered when the mumbler was assigned to kitchen duty. He didn't cook, he didn't eat. He just stood there, mumbling to himself, fingers twitching against his mouth like he was trying to pull words out of it. Richard tried to talk to him once. He walked over and said, "Hey, you can help me with the carrots if you want." The mumbler just turned his head slightly, enough that Richard could see the side of his face. The man's eyes were glazed, not unfocused, but like they were looking at something behind reality itself. Then he whispered something Richard couldn't make out. A shiver ran through him. He smiled awkwardly, trying to ease the tension. Then he realized the mumbler had soiled himself. The smell hit the air, sharp and sour. Richard called for a nurse. "Hey, this guy needs a change. Before he could finish, the mumbler let out a scream so loud it cracked through the hallway. "Dirty! Dirty! Dirty! I'm dirty!" He clawed at his own clothes, screaming it over and over again. The nurses rushed in, strapped him down, and wheeled him away. The sound of his voice echoed down the hall even after he was gone. Richard said everyone froze, and that day, nobody said a word for the rest of the shift. Months passed. Life at Ravenwood went on. Same screams, same sounds, same smell of overcooked stew. Then one rainy evening, around 6 months later, Richard was closing up the kitchen when he saw something move in the hallway window. A shadow. He stepped closer, thinking it was one of the guards doing rounds. But when he opened the door, the mumbler was standing there. No nurse, no escort, just him mumbling, his lips moving fast, hands twitching like he was counting something on his fingers. Richard said his blood went cold. Patients weren't supposed to roam free, especially not from the West Wing. "Hey, buddy," Richard said cautiously, keeping his distance. "You're not supposed to be here. Where's your nurse?" No response, just mumbling. Then, as Richard listened closer, he started to understand the words. Mama said be quiet. Mama said don't cry. Daddy said don't look. Don't look. Don't look. Don't. Richard froze. Then the tone changed. Mama, I killed you. Daddy, I killed you too. Baby cried too loud. I made it stop. Why did I make it stop? The words crawled under his skin. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. Like a child confessing something they didn't understand. Richard whispered, Jesus Christ. The mumbler suddenly looked up. For the first time, their eyes met. Richard said it felt like staring into a mirror that only reflected pain. The man's eyes were black, glassy, empty. Why do I kill? He whispered. Why won't they stop telling me to kill? The staff always told them to play along if a patient started hallucinating. Act like you understood them. It calmed them down. Richard forced a shaky smile. What are the voices saying now? The mumbler tilted his head, listening to something that wasn't there. Kill. They say kill them all. We're trapped, Bill. You hear it too, don't you? The cage. We're all in it. Richard realized then the mumbler knew his name. No one had told him that. I don't hear them, Richard said carefully. But maybe we can tell them to stop together. The mumbler nodded slowly. Richard took a breath and said, On 3, okay? 1, 2, 3. Together they yelled, Shut up! The shout echoed down the hallway. Within seconds, nurses came running. They pinned the mumbler to the ground as he thrashed and screamed, Shut up! Shut up! They strapped him into a straitjacket, dragging him away. Richard said he could still hear that scream even after they locked him in the West Wing again. Later that night, Richard was called into the head doctor's office. Dr. Lowell. He was a tall, cold man with a permanent cigarette between his fingers. The office smelled like old tobacco and leather. Dr. Lowell motioned for him to sit. You handled that well, Richard, he said. Most people panic in situations like that. Why was he even loose? Richard asked. He's supposed to be sedated. Lowell leaned back, tapping ash into a tray. Do you know why he's here? Richard shook his head. The doctor sighed. His name's Harold Pierce. He was a soldier. Vietnam. Came back home in 1971. Perfectly fine, on the surface. Then one day, he just snapped. Richard didn't say anything. The doctor continued. He killed his wife, his parents, and his infant daughter. When the police found him, he was sitting in the nursery, talking to the baby. She'd been dead for hours. Richard's stomach turned. Lowell kept talking, voice low and almost casual. They said he was cradling her, whispering about worms inside her head. He said he had to let them out. Richard felt sick. He remembered the words the mumbler said earlier. Your head was full of worms, baby. I had to eat them so you'd be safe. Lowell exhaled smoke through his nose. War breaks some people beyond repair. But that man, I don't think it was just war. Something inside him snapped for good. All we can do is keep him contained. He paused, staring at Richard. You did well today. But remember something. No matter how calm they seem, they're still broken. Never think you can fix them. Richard stayed at Ravenwood for another 10 years. He saw hundreds of patients come and go. Some recovered. Most didn't. He said what haunted him most wasn't the screams, or the violence, or even the deaths. It was the silence, the quiet between those moments when the halls seemed to hold their breath. Sometimes, late at night, when he'd be closing the kitchen alone, he swore he could still hear faint mumbling coming from the West Wing. Not loud enough to understand. Just a whisper, like someone trying to pray through broken teeth. He told me once, that place doesn't leave you, Vincent. You leave it, but it stays in your head. After Ravenwood closed down in the early 80s, the patients were transferred elsewhere, and the building was left to rot. Locals said they still hear sounds there sometimes, pipes knocking, doors creaking. But those who worked there know better. They say the air remembers. My uncle doesn't talk about the asylum much anymore. He's in his late 70s now, and his hands still tremble when he pours his coffee. He said the worst part isn't what he saw, it's that he got used to it. When I visit him, he sometimes stares at the corner of the room and mumbles to himself. Not words, just sounds. And when I ask him what he's saying, he always gives the same answer. Just trying to remember the silence. He doesn't believe in ghosts. He doesn't believe in curses. But when he tells these stories, you can see it in his eyes. Ravenwood never really let him go. I never truly understood the meaning of fear until I moved back into my childhood home, alone, surrounded by memories I had tried desperately to forget. My name is Evelyn Clark. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, in a white brick house on the outskirts of the woods. My parents were quiet people, not cruel, but distant, always wrapped up in their own lives. But my life had always revolved around someone else. My twin sister, Madeline. Madeline and I were inseparable as children. We wore matching dresses, braids in our hair, even shared toys. Our neighbors often commented on how identical we looked, how strange it was that two people could mirror each other so perfectly. But it wasn't just our appearances that were intertwined, it was everything. Our childhood was a constant reflection, one of laughter and play, shadowed by a subtle unease I didn't recognize at the time. I suppose the first memory that unsettled me occurred when we were 7. I had been searching for my favorite doll, a porcelain girl with soft lavender hair that I had loved for years. It had disappeared from my bed. Frantically, I found it shoved under the old toy chest. At first, relief washed over me, but then I froze. The doll's face had been slashed, its eyes hollowed, its mouth cut into a grotesque grin. I ran to my parents, trembling, hoping they would scold her. They laughed it off as a childish prank. But that night, Madeline whispered in the dark, "It will be our little secret." I should have been afraid then. But love is strange. It blinds you. I laughed it off, convinced that she was just being mischievous. As we grew older, the differences between us became impossible to ignore. I thrived in school, always participating in plays, debates, and parties. Madeline became quieter, slipping into the background as if she were merely observing life rather than living it. Teachers praised me for my charm, my confidence. Madeline's silence was often misinterpreted as shyness. We shared a room in high school, as we had since birth. I would come home from school bubbling with stories about friends, boys, and achievements. Madeline would simply nod, her face a mask of neutrality. But I noticed her watching me, eyes flicking with a strange intensity that made me uneasy at times. Despite the differences, there was an undeniable bond between us. But I began noticing patterns, tiny, cruel details in her behavior that others wouldn't see. Food would disappear in strange patterns. Objects would be broken in ways that couldn't be accidental. And sometimes, at night, I would hear whispers behind the locked doors of our shared bedroom. It wasn't just mischief anymore. At 16, I caught her staring at me with a knife in her hand, though she claimed it was for carving wood. Her eyes were unblinking, fixed, and when I screamed, she merely smiled and said, "It's just a game." We attended the same university, sharing a dorm room freshman year. I was ecstatic, my life a blur of parties, late-night study sessions, and fleeting romances. Madeline claimed she enjoyed herself, but I often felt her presence like a shadow hovering over my shoulder. It was the feeling of being watched by someone who knows you better than anyone else. Then the night happened. I barely remember it, just fragments. I woke in my dorm bed in excruciating pain, blood staining my clothes, and an emptiness that made my stomach turn. I tried to call for help, but my words were weak. And then I saw her, Madeline, kneeling beside me, her hair falling over her face, as she whispered, "It will be our little secret." I screamed, but the sound seemed to dissolve into the walls. The next morning, campus security found a man, someone I had known from my classes, murdered beyond recognition. My mind struggled to reconcile the reality with what I had seen. I left university soon after, determined to escape. But no matter where I went, Madeline followed. Or at least, it felt that way. At 23, I had finally secured my first real job. Madeline had moved in with me, claiming she wanted to help with household chores while pursuing her own studies online. I remember one evening, returning home late after a stressful day, feeling the chill of the empty apartment. My boss had been harassing me for weeks. I was exhausted and terrified, unsure how to navigate the situation without losing my job. That night, I thought I heard it again. Through the thin bedroom wall, a soft, almost playful whisper. "It will be our little secret." My blood ran cold. The next morning, my boss was found dead in his office, mutilated in ways too horrific to describe. It was then I realized the truth. I wasn't being haunted. I was protecting someone, or perhaps being used. The line between fear and love had blurred so completely that I couldn't tell if I was the victim or an accomplice. Just a few weeks ago, I was mugged walking home late at night. 2 men had attacked me, dragging me through the alleyways near my apartment. I was bruised, bleeding, and terrified. But I knew, even before I saw her face, what Madeline would say. "It will be our little secret." The police found the 2 assailants the next morning. Their bodies were unrecognizable, eyes gouged, mouths torn, and limbs dismembered. I didn't call the authorities in time. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, calm and serene, whispering in the dark, her intentions hidden behind that soft voice I had loved for 25 years. Eventually, I was admitted to St. Augustine's psychiatric hospital in New Jersey, where the doctors assured me I was safe. The walls were white and padded, the air sterile, but the silence was unbearable. Every creak in the hall, every whisper of wind through broken windows reminded me of her. They tried to explain away Madeline, claiming she was stillborn, that she never existed. But the memories were too vivid to ignore. I could see her standing behind me in the mirror, in the corner of the room, even in my dreams. Sometimes I would hear laughter echoing down the long corridors of the asylum at night, soft and eerie, carrying that chilling, familiar phrase, "It will be our little secret." In the daytime, I wandered the hallways under supervision, but the asylum itself seemed alive. Doors would slam, lights would flicker, and shadows danced where no one else could see them. I began noticing strange symbols scratched into the walls, signs that someone, or something, had been here long before me. One night, the lights went out entirely. I was left alone in my room. I tried to scream, but the walls muffled my voice. The temperature dropped. My breath came in ragged clouds. And then I saw her, a fleeting shadow at the edge of the darkness. Her shape was human, yet distorted, like a reflection in shattered glass. She whispered my name, not softly, not lovingly, but with a promise of inevitability. I tried to move, but my body froze. For hours, I watched the shadows bend and twist, forming faces, hands, mouths that opened silently to scream. When the morning staff finally arrived, the room was empty except for me, curled into a corner, shaking uncontrollably. Now, I sit in this small white room, waiting. They tell me it's for my protection, that Madeline is dangerous, that she must be restrained for the safety of others. I know differently. I know she is dangerous, yes, but to me, she is still my twin, my reflection, the other half of myself. The doctors try to explain away the mutilated bodies, the strange occurrences, the whispers. They call it delusion, hallucination, psychosis. I call it love. I spoke to my parents an hour ago. They insisted in shaky voices. Madeline was a stillborn. I smiled politely, but inside I felt the cold knife of truth. The memories are mine. No one can take them away. Every whispered promise, every mutilated secret, it will be our little secret. I remember it all. At night, when the lights flicker and the shadows stretch along the walls, I swear I hear her whisper. Always the same words, always in the same tone, a chilling melody I will never forget. I can't leave. I can't run. And I know, deep down, that I never will. Madeline is waiting, and she always keeps her promises.